Hi everyone, welcome to this Samsung Galaxy Masterclass. My name is Shaaz Jung and I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in here today. So this session is going to revolve around my journey through the woods with my Samsung Galaxy devices. I'm just going to run you through a quick presentation. I'm going to try and not make it too long and too technical and hopefully interesting. And after that, you can ask us some questions and I'll try my best to answer as many questions as possible. Great, let's dive right into it. A little bit about myself. So as a wildlife photographer, I've spent the last 10 years in the jungle using the camera to immortalize moments, relish life, and inspire people. I'm also a cinematographer for National Geographic, and I was recently the director of photography for a feature film on Black Panthers. For those who follow me, you know how obsessed I am with the melanistic leopard. As a wildlife enthusiast, I absolutely love leopards, and I've spent the last 10 years using the camera as a tool to document several different individuals. I've also helped write research papers on melanism for big cats, and one of my primary professions involves running a boutique wildlife lodge in South India. Great. But today, we are here because I am also a Samsung Galaxy expert. And I've been using my Galaxy devices to uncover the beauty of the jungle. As a Galaxy expert, I'm fortunate to explore the forest with some of the most powerful and versatile Galaxy phones. I've been using the Note 10 Plus, the S20 Ultra, and the Note 20 Ultra over the past year. I'm extremely impressed with the evolution. It's been an incredible journey to capture our flora and fauna with a unique and wider mobile perspective. And that brings us to why we are here today. So welcome to this Galaxy Masterclass, where I'm going to discuss some of my favorite features and what methods I use to capture photos from my Galaxy devices in the jungle. Before we jump into that, I just want to talk a little bit about my past and my present and give you a little introduction. So my journey, like all of us, is divided into two, my past and my present. Let's start with the past and quickly talk about my journey into wildlife photography. My parents were avid wildlife enthusiasts and conservationists, and as a result, I was raised in the jungle. I had absolutely no social life, and my best friend for years was an elephant named Wilson, who was in fact born on the same day as me. Little did I know my exposure to the jungle from a young age would instill a powerful passion in me that would be ignited as soon as I graduated from university. So this passion also came up and rose when I saw my first leopard, none other than he who you see on the screen. His name was Scarface, and that's why this picture, which I've chosen for my past, is Scarface. Scarface inspired me to pick up the camera. He was the catalyst. He was the guy who started it all for me. He was the reason, and he is the reason why I'm here today. Now let's get into the present. So 10 years later, I started in 2010, but 10 years later, as I evolved as a photographer, I saw a shift in my perspective. Today, I enjoy exploring the forest with a wider perspective. And as a Samsung flagship user, we partnered together and I had the opportunity to explore the forest with this new perspective. So my central focus is, of course, megafauna. And capturing tigers, leopards, black panthers, and elephants from a phone hadn't really been done extensively and professionally before. It was definitely a challenge as these were some of the most elusive animals on Earth. But I was confident in both my ability and in Samsung's technology. Great. So coming here, this is one of my favorite pictures, which we will get into. As a professional photographer, my standards are always high, and creating photos that were visually dramatic of elusive wildlife isn't really easy. Nature photography with our mobile device is a growing trend, primarily for macro and landscape photography. But the wide angle lens captured depth beautifully. But I wanted to push the boundaries and create powerful photos of megafauna with Galaxy devices. I wanted to shoot pictures that would, evoke emotion in the viewer, taken from a phone, which you can actually put up on a wall or be exhibited in a gallery. So these are a few of my tips, and the first one I'm going to start with is first, before understanding your camera, is to understand your subject. So in wildlife, your subject could be as elusive as a black panther or as common as a butterfly in your garden. The aim is to do justice to the subject and portray the beauty of our flora and fauna in a way that inspires people. But to do this successfully, it's very important to understand the animal you are photographing and use the habitat around to complement that subject or animal. So let's first start with this picture. Now, when Samsung sent me one of their flagship devices, the S20 Ultra, I said, the first picture I want, the first subject I want is a black panther, captured dramatically from this device. And so let's start with that one. I shot this with the S20 Ultra and chose to go vertical to also emphasize the tall and twisted trees that was so important to his survival. Leopards are the rulers of the canopy, and without these tall trees which you see here, they would not exist. I chose not to zoom in with the tele lens and shot this wide on the primary lens to signify the importance of the habitat and portray the panther in his natural environment. Whenever I photograph the panther, I like the theme of the photo to resonate around something. And with the panther, I like it to resonate around darkness. So on Pro mode, I increased the shutter to darken the image. This accentuated the colors of the setting sun, as you can see. The silhouetted trees and darker image signified the approaching darkness, and my subject was none other than the master of darkness himself. So this is how I like to weave my subjects, environment, settings based on the camera I'm using to ultimately tell a deeper story. The next picture we come to is a pretty magical shot, which I shot recently with the Note 20 Ultra. So as I mentioned earlier, my past, where my parents were avid wildlifers, they started a wildlife lodge in 1990 in a forest in South India called Bandipur National Park. So the difference between Bandipur and Nagarhole, where I am tracking the panther, is that Bandipur has these beautiful hills. And in some spots, you can get the Nilgiris in the backdrop. Now, I absolutely love the forested hills. And so many, there's so many untold stories, so many unseen sunrises. There's such magic, and there's something magical about these hilly landscapes. Each hillock to me resembled the house of God, a place of absolute calm. So on a windy evening, I ascended the hills of Bandipur National Park, as you can see here, with my Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. At the very top, we were greeted by this beautiful leopardess that ghosted through the forest. It was a surreal experience, and I wanted my picture to tell a story. I didn't want to focus, bang into the leopard and miss the entire scene. I wanted the nearest blade of grass and the furthest hillock on the horizon to be in focus. I wanted the picture to breathe the landscape, and rather revolve around the entire scene. So this leopard, as you can see, taking this wider perspective, belongs to these hills. And I wanted to make her feel small in the presence of these hills. And I've always said this before, there's something beautiful about feeling small. And that's what nature does. It takes you to these places where, you feel small. You look at the great hills around you. You look at the ancient trees. And you just look at life and you realize how small we are, just tiny particles of dust, in this entire universe. And it kind of grounds you as a person. And when I take pictures that are wide like this, that's the sort of feel and the essence I like to, resonate around. So I shot this at 108 megapixels on the Note 20 Ultra. And what's great about that is I could compose the image and crop into it without losing resolution. The 108 megapixels can be shot on the primary lens. We'll come to this image later and show you how I've cropped into it and still maintained a good resolution. Let's come to the next slide. All right. So we've all grown up in awe of the mighty tiger. This particular tigress is very dear to me. We call her Kismat. And I know her since the day she was born. Her father was extremely dear to me. His name was Yuko. And Kismat seems to have become as bold as him. And this tigress allows you to get very close. And this is where knowing your subject is so important. So that gives me a great opportunity to get a beautiful habitat frame. So when I received one of the Galaxy flagship devices, I knew that if I had to photograph a tiger, I had to find this particular female. And with her, I also call her the daughter of the waters. She's a tigress you often see resting in the water. And I love the element of water over here in this frame. I love the reflection, the green foliage, the blue sky, and it was a vibrant setting. And the Galaxy Note captured this habitat and the colors so beautifully, as you can see. Next. Here's now not a tiger, but a tiger butterfly. And again, from the hills. Again, knowing your subject is so important. I wanted to get a dreamy, natural bouquet with the primary lens. That means I had to go really close, but going close to a butterfly is not easy because it flies. So getting that bouquet wasn't difficult. Why? Because you can see the backdrop, which is the hills, is really far away from my subject, which means that achieving a bouquet is not very difficult. Now, it is not easy to capture a butterfly from this close in the wilderness. So for this shot, I actually used a tripod and set the focus on the flower and waited for the butterfly there to land on the flower. And I used a simple, remote trigger to capture it. With the Note 20, of course, Ultra, you can use your S Pen to remotely capture these images. So the past few slides were about understanding the subject and the habitat. Now let's come to understanding your camera. So over the past year, as I mentioned, I've really enjoyed using my Galaxy devices. The S20 Ultra and the Note 20 Ultra have really allowed me to not just widen my perspective, but also my portfolio. We were taught early to believe that large zooms, are always better for the picture. Yes, details and portraits are great and can be expressive, but how many of us use a wide angle instead? In the last few slides, I showed you the beauty and the importance of storytelling that can be achieved from a wider perspective if you know your subject. Now, I've used these Galaxy devices for both photography and videography. So let's first get into photography. Let's take a look at the new Note 20 Ultra's rear camera setup. So I've got it here with me, and it's a beautiful, beautiful device. So as you can see at the back on the screen, the first is a 12 megapixel wide lens. The second is a 108 megapixel primary lens. And the third is a 12 megapixel tele-lens. Notice how the new laser AF sensor is there, which enables faster autofocusing. I'm going to get into this a little later as well, which is the AF sensor. Now, what's different about mobile photography is that your aperture is fixed. Aperture, what is aperture? Aperture is basically the opening in a lens that allows the light in. It's very similar to the pupil in our eye. The aperture is calibrated and controlled with f-stops, as you can see, and also controls the depth and the light. Now the aperture in our cameras are fixed at the lowest possible f-stop, as wide as possible, to allow in as much light as it can reach the small sensor in your phone. Here you can see the apertures are fixed on each lens. The ultra wide has an aperture of f2.2. The primary lens has a larger aperture, which means it allows in more light at f1.8, and the tele lens at f3. Therefore, since these values are fixed in mobile photography, we control the light and the exposure by changing the shutter speed on Pro mode. But if you're not on Pro mode, you have to change the light by using the exposure dial. So let's just go to the first lens, my most favorite lens, which is the primary lens. So now that we've understood our fixed aperture values, the depth in the bouquet in an image can be achieved, with distance. The closer you are to the subject, the shallower the depth. The primary lens offers the widest aperture at f1.8. Let's take a look at some of these images from the primary lens. Here is one of my most favorite subjects. Now this is an Indian chameleon. Believe it or not, they are everywhere in your rural parts and even in the forested areas. They're usually very calm and allow us to get very close once you get comfortable with their presence. With wildlife, it's always important to allow the subject, time and space to get used to it. And when you do, and when they earn that level of trust, they can really allow you to get close like I did with this chameleon. Now, these chameleons have the most distinct eyes in the entire animal kingdom, and they're known for their magnificent camouflage. Now, I have stared into the eyes of a black panther, and they are magical. But when I look at the eyes of a chameleon, there's nothing like it. I wanted to highlight both these aspects, which was the eyes and the camouflage. So I decided to, frame him against a green backdrop. So, you could see how similar those yellow and green leaves are to his texture. And I went close enough to get the focus just on his eye. What a magnificent creature. And over here, I chose the primary lens, which was fixed at f1.8 to get the best bouquet. And at 108 megapixels, I could crop in a little and compose the image the way I want without losing much resolution. So the primary lens allows you to also achieve fabulous macro shots at f1.8. Now, if you have a look here, you see this caterpillar in the light, and I chose to shoot this against a shaded background. Now, I always say this, whenever you're shooting something, take a minute, take a breath, breathe in the scene, see what's around you. And if your subject is in the light, try to also see how you're going to position that subject, because the background is just as important as the subject itself. So on Pro mode, I increased the shutter to further darken the shaded areas. So what I did here was, because the caterpillar was in the light, I positioned him against a shadow, a shaded background. That really made him stand out. So a well-lit subject with a dark bouquet always works well, and this is a great example of composition and using the play of light and the environment around to complement the subject. Now, this was, of course, originally shot vertically, but because of the slide, I wanted to make it full screen, so I've zoomed in and shown it to you horizontally. So we've seen this shot in the previous slide, and as mentioned earlier, I used a simple setup with a tripod and a remote trigger to click this. My focus was locked on the flower and the hope that a butterfly would come sit in the same focal plane as the flower. It did. So, another feature which I like is the live focus mode. Why? Because monkeys, for this particular shot, I use the focus mode because monkeys aren't butterflies. I wasn't in the mood to get extremely close and get bitten. Live focus works from slightly further away, and at f1.8, I could take pictures in the mode which allows me to adjust the level of background blur after the photo was clicked to play with the mood. Now let's come, I've mentioned 108 megapixels before. Let's come to the 108 megapixel. So this coupled with the dedicated laser focusing tool allows for quicker and sharper focus. So we've seen this, in a wider frame, but let's look at the cropped in version. How beautiful is that? Without losing much resolution, I've cropped in, I still have 5,000 pixels on the longest side. This leopard and the blades of grass and the trees are still sharp. How impressive. Again, shot at 108 megapixels, but when I zoom in, look at that. While you look at it, I'm just going to have a quick sip of water. So over here, you can see that it's been substantially cropped, but still the focus is great. And the horizontal view was again done based on my design needs. Notice what I've done here is the simple rule of thirds applied in most of my images called, in photography, it's very common where you allow more space on the right. Great. Coming to this shot. Just give me 1 second. Can you open the window, please? Just getting very warm. I'm just going to open a window. It's getting pretty warm in here. A little more, please. Yeah. So the wind is coming in. Yeah, great. So as you can see, now let's going. Here is one of my most favorite images. Let's come to this. This is an elephant I've followed for the past 14 years. You see, it isn't just about taking a picture. It's about sharing a deep bond with these subjects, a bond we can capture over time and immortalize with our cameras. Elephants are large subjects, and their grandeur is often portrayed best from a wider perspective. At dawn, we entered the forest and saw this giant ambling through the woods. Now just imagine that scene. Just you go in, you're with your Galaxy device, you want a wide shot, and in the distance, you see this beautiful elephant. Now positioning is very important as we couldn't stay too far away. The light was absolutely breathtaking, but to capture the rays, I had to seriously underexpose and run the risk of silhouetting my subject. However, with minor adjustments in post, I revived the shadows, as you can see over here. Another picture, over here is a misty morning. And for those who followed me, you see a lot of misty morning pictures. So misty mornings in the forest are always special. There's an ominous silence in the air as a blue veil of mist blankets the woods. It's the perfect time to achieve those eerie, dim-lit photos in the setting. And I wanted my subjects to be discreet. I wanted them to be subtle, yet powerful. So this picture over here, I wanted to give my subject a ghostly aura. So shooting in low light isn't easy, but I was very impressed with the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra's low light performance. The less aggressive noise reduction allowed for better details. The dynamic range and the color saturation in low light was great. All of these thanks to the enlarged pixels and Nona binning. The Galaxy Note 20's Ultra actually combines 9 of these pixels into one large, and Nona binning allows for the best of both worlds, where the high resolution sensor allows for 12 megapixel photos at a larger pixel size. Here's another low light shot from the S20 Ultra. So these images have been cropped to fit the PowerPoint slides, of course. This beautiful male tiger is a tiger we call Carl. He's one of the big males, in the tourism zone. He's very bold and allows us to get very close. So I was trying to get as low as possible in my gypsy to frame him against the mist rather than the ground. Getting that angle right is so important. And with wildlife photography, the more eye level you are with the animal, the better your composition and photograph. The Note 20 Ultra has a mode called Bright Night, which is very, very impressive. But in wildlife photography, I choose not to use this unless my subject is stationary. Coming to the next slide. So here's an image from the same series. In low lit conditions like this, I always like to experiment with my white balance. Now, white balance is measured in the K value called Kelvin. The lower the K value, the cooler the image, i.e. more blue. The warmer the K value, the more reds and the more yellows in your image. So in this image, I chose to lower the Kelvin on Pro mode and make the mist more blue. Now you can control the Kelvin on Pro mode. Coming to another shot. Here's another misty morning shot and an elephant this time. Now the reason why most of my low lit images are in the morning is because we have to leave the parks in the evening, and by 5:36 the light usually gets very dramatic by 6:30, but we have to be outside. But settings like these are just so beautiful and so picturesque, especially to shoot wide from, and the Galaxy does such a great job. So over here, one of my favorite settings are when the mist doesn't envelop the entire landscape, but is quietly looming in the background to this. So that was from my primary lens. Now let's get to the 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now I was very, very impressed with the S20 Ultras and the Note 20 Ultra's ultra wide lens. Generally on most phones, ultra wide lenses aren't the most prioritized. But on the Note 20 Ultra, I really liked the dynamic range, and this was important for landscape photography. Also, maintaining the same color profile between lenses, which is your ultra wide, primary, and tele, makes it very easy for professionals and people like us who put our photos together, and create collages and series. Now, as a wildlife photographer, I wouldn't use the ultra wide lens on most subjects like mammals, like tigers and black panthers, as they get lost in the frame. And I'll show you how, and I'll give you examples of that soon. But I'd use it primarily for landscapes and the element of storytelling. Look at these two slides. So as you can see, this mode over here significantly expands your view, allowing you to capture more of the scene. This works great for dramatic scapes like this. I now had the ability to go wider and capture the moon and the approaching darkness in this wider frame. So it helped me not just to expand my view, but also expand my story and tell a deeper one. In this first picture, it just looks like a dramatic sunset. But when I go to the next picture, it shows that the night is near and will soon engulf the last of the light. So here's another example. Other than landscapes, large subjects are also great for the ultra wide and are great to expand on. This is another example. Here's an ancient banyan tree. Now, I absolutely love banyan trees. Just the way they are, the way they're made, how ancient they are, how many stories they have. Sorry, I'm just going to put this back over here. Yeah. So how many stories they have, they can tell. And also what's great about banyan trees, I call them, the tree of life. And why I do that is because it's home to some of the best, families of leopards, which I've followed for years. So in the first picture, which you see over here, you see the banyan tree. However, the beauty of this tree lies in its age and size. So I used an ultra wide, and boom, all of a sudden you have the entire tree right from the ground roots to the entire leaf clutter. Another picture over here is a simple picture of deer at a waterhole, but in a wider frame. It's always important to bring that, element of any different element into the picture. So over here, when I saw a vibrant sky, blue, blue is the ocean, blue is the sky, I decided to go wide and allow, myself to incorporate the sky into the picture. And that burst of color which you see is just beautiful and adds so much to it. So coming here, here's a quick series, as I was mentioning, to sum it all up. I spent the evening with this tiger, and he allowed me enough time to play with my compositions. You know, the first picture is with the ultra wide lens, the second from a primary lens, and the third, which you can see, is from a tele lens at 5x. Now, if I had to choose one, I'd of course choose the one in the middle, which is shot from the primary lens. The subject, of course, like a tiger, is too small for the ultra wide, and the tele lens eliminates the habitat and that whole element of storytelling I was saying. So the center picture, you see the tall trees, you see the tiger in its habitat. I love it. Similar to elephants, now the difference over here, why I've chosen elephants over here, is because it's a wider frame and the subject over here is larger. So like I said, with larger images, the ultra wide works well. However, the elephant looks great, unlike the tiger, in all three, because there are more of them and it's a larger subject for me to play with. Now, here's something very interesting. You know, as a professional wildlife photographer, I am very particular about the details. When I got my hands on the S20 Ultra, I have to say I was absolutely blown by their zoom capabilities. Both cameras could zoom up to 20x, but what I found very interesting was being able to zoom, 100x on the S20 Ultra and 50x on the Note 20 Ultra. But what I found amazing is using the tele lens as a spotting scope. So here we have a couple of videos. I'm just going to try and play it. The first video, have a look at this. Just look at that. You know, at 20x, I've zoomed in, and all of a sudden, you can see an elephant in the villages ambling through the fields. The forest department was actually looking for this guy for a long, long time, but we stood at a vantage point, and with, this phone, I could just zoom in and capture it. And that's when it dawned on me that I could use this both in video mode and in photo mode to zoom in. Let's look at the second video. Now you can see this is from my house, just my balcony. And there you go. You have 3 elephants and a baby. So, with guests, this became amazing. I could guide guests, guide clients. I could, spot birds, identify birds, and I could do a lot with my camera all of a sudden. And in fact, I even spotted a leopard with the zoom focus, which was sitting far away on a tree. So that was using that. Now, before we come to this, just going back here, I wanted to say how using this works, for conservation, for creating awareness. And that's something I want to pursue further with Samsung in the months to come. All right, let's go to this. Now, as you saw, zooming in today, zooming into the mic, could we just open the zooming into the mic over to the video over here, we saw a zoom in mic feature. Now, some of you may have known this already from the previous flagship models. So notice when I was zooming in, there was that yellow mic. For those who don't know, the zoom in mic feature allows you to zoom in on particular sounds and help amplify it. Now that was very cool. I could zoom in to a bird calling on a tree and like the serpent eagle. And then when I zoomed into that subject or that animal, the sounds would be amplified in that direction. Now what the Note 20 did Ultra, which was a great evolution, that's what I was talking about earlier, how technology progresses, is they brought in some serious improvements to the audio recording. It has 3 different microphones to help capture sounds from any of those 3 different directions. The new Bluetooth mic allows you to now use Bluetooth earbuds as a pin microphone to capture sounds remotely. So you can see here on the screen, you have the 3 microphones, and above, if you connect to Bluetooth, you have a Bluetooth. I can place it somewhere and capture sounds remotely. Now that is very, very cool, and I love that feature which you can use. So that brings us now into the video capabilities. Now, as a cinematographer and a photographer, I'm always juggling between photos and videos. You know, we've discussed the camera lenses with regard to photography. So now let's quickly cover the video capabilities. So have a look at this scene over here, this slide. To have a phone that can capture 8K footage on the go is very cool. The Note 20 Ultra can capture 8K at 24 frames per second. The new 21:9 ratio gives it a very cool cinematic feel. The Pro mode allows us to capture, you know, all of these settings and use these features. And another cool addition is the zoom slider, which allows me to set my zoom parameters. I now have granular control over my zoom speed for smoother videos. So coming to this next slide, which is a video. Let's just watch it play. Yeah, it's playing over there. So you see me sliding that zoom parameter on the side. And what it does is it then takes that motion and gives you that granular effect, which is very, very, you know, it almost looks professional. So as I mentioned earlier, being a photographer and a cinematographer, a feature I find very useful is the ability to also record in 8K and take 33 megapixel pictures by tapping that camera icon, which you can see on the bottom right. It's as simple as this. You know, you just click that picture in video mode and boom, it, you know, grabs a 33 megapixel photo. So here's a video. Let's hope it plays. I've recorded the screen. So you click it. And that's it. It's, I think the video is not showing you the final picture. If we just go a little forward, you may be able to see the final picture, but I'll get it done over here. There we go. That is the 33 megapixel screenshot, which I took from the 8K footage. Now that is extremely impressive and, you know, one of my favorite features. It's as simple as that. Just record, focus, and click. Now, lastly, you know, I want to come to the Note 20 Ultra's editing suite, which allows for easy editing on the go. You know, as a social media influencer and a content creator, this is just such a handy device. So I'm going to play this video, which will hopefully show you how easy it is to just stack videos together and put it on a timeline to create a little reel. There you go. You just choose your pictures. I usually like to favorite the ones so I know which ones to put together. And it needs to play. It needs to go a little further up front. Okay, it's hung in between, but usually it will show you the stacked picture reel. Let me try playing that again. Could we go to the end of the video, halfway through the video on this one? If we could just play this. Yeah, drag it all the way to the end almost. Yes, here you go. So this is how it looks when I stacked it all together. It's a little jittery, I'm sorry about that. So over there, the video is not playing very smoothly, but what you can see and what I wanted to highlight was the laser AF, you know, the focusing. It's so quick on the Note 20 Ultra, and that's a great addition from the S20 Ultra. I absolutely love that. And the fact that this was shot on 8K at 24 frames per second, I had the option of going to 21:9 ratio just to give it, you know, that fabulous cinematic feel. And at the end of it all, without having to go on my laptop, put it all together, I could just compile it all into, you know, one video and then post it on my social media or for whatever uses, I really wanted. So that's that, guys. I know before we wrap up, like I said, I want this to be short, simple. I didn't want it to be too long, too technical, going into the features which, are not really relevant to my genre. I wanted to keep it, very, very relevant. And I hope you liked it. And of course, we're going to leave. I wanted to have this done, smoothly and pretty concise, so we could leave more time for your questions. But just before that, I want to run through some of my most favorite images just to do a recap. So over here. So of course, the chameleon, the distinct eyes, like I was saying, guys, know your subject, know what you want your image to what story you want to tell. Over here, I wanted the chameleon, which was the master of camouflage, to be camouflage. Positioned against a green background, I wanted to bring out his beautiful eyes. So very easy to do, got comfortable with us. Primary lens went in, f1.8, gives me a great bouquet. The chameleon allows me to get close, unlike other subjects. I get this lovely shot. Next one, recapping, of course, this beautiful leopard. I didn't want to jump in, get too close, nor did I want to be too wide. Cropped in just so that I could maintain the Nilgiris, which you can see in the background, those mountains, and show you that beautiful ridge over there. Of course, the master of darkness, just, drifting, ghosting through the forest as darkness approaches. And that's what the sun does in the backdrop. It shows that, that eerie feel of how the sun's going down and the foreground is getting dark and the shadows are slowly becoming darker, and how he is soon going to become one with the night. And yeah, that's kind of the feel I wanted to give. And on the right of my frame, you see this big tree. Now, a lot of people would not want to zoom in. They'd want to cut that tree out. But I wanted to silhouette the trees. I wanted to show that, that's how dark it's going to get. And that's how dark your other subjects are. But in spite of that, the panther is even darker. Of course, as I mentioned, Kismat, the daughter of the waters, just love the vibrance in this setting. It's so colorful. You have the sky, which is blue. You have the greens. You have, the tiger. It's just a beautiful, beautiful setting. And my most favorite shot of my most favorite elephant, followed for the last 14 years, and massive tusker. And yeah, he's a magnificent creature to get, on your phone, because like I said, large subjects, you can get further out and still make it dramatic. Another one of Sorry, everyone, we got cut off. The Internet dropped off. Very sorry about that, but hope all of you are still back here with us. So as I was wrapping up, before we move on to questions and answers, finishing off with my favorite, recap of slides, you have this beautiful elephant, which is just this magnificent creature, which I've followed for the past 14 years. And, I wanted to show you this particular image of how the light is dramatically following him. I wanted to break the rules of photography and not do the rule of thirds. I wanted to center him almost like a godly figure in the center of the frame with these, beautiful rays shining in on him. And like I said, the larger the subject, the easier it is, to get more creative with your perspective. Again, an elephant over here, the same guy. So as I was, earlier saying, a lot of you find it very difficult to go into the forest. I understand it's not easy. Everyone does not have the access and, the privilege of going into jungles all the time to see tigers, leopards. I'm very grateful for that. And it's a large reason why I do what I do. But I just wanted to show this image to show you that it's also possible to get beautiful shots even in your backyard, even just out there anywhere. I learned photography in my garden, and, just go out there and experiment with your camera, use simple subjects, use the play of light, use the ambience and the feel around you. And it shouldn't just be about taking a picture. Through this entire slides, I hope, I've shown you how important it is to tell a story. So that's that. Having used these devices, the flagship devices, I've used the Note 10 Plus, the S20 Ultra, the Note 20 Ultra. It's been an incredible journey. And to be very honest, I was so focused on zooming in and shooting, I had forgotten about the wider perspectives. And for those who followed me over the last year, you started to see, a wider perspective. And these Galaxy devices have not just, widened my perspective, but like I said, bettered my portfolio through these images which you've seen. It's giving you a more truer feel to the jungle. And those are some of the tips which, I thought would be very helpful to share. And like I said, I wanted to just concise it, and make this small, not very technical. So we left some time for your questions and answers. So thank you. That was, the Galaxy Masterclass. And now we're going to move in to answering some of your questions. Great. Let's just wait for some of the questions. Okay. The first question is, could you share some tips for budding wildlife photographers? Good question. Something I'm often asked. A tip which I always give people is to not be narrow-minded. Photography is very personal. It's about your journey. What you're shooting is a reflection of your journey. It's mirroring who you are and your perception of the world. So, don't narrow your mind. Don't let others shape your vision. So that's a tip which I like to give all wildlife photographers. Go out there, let your character shape the picture. Don't let someone else shape your image. Be creative. If I'm using a Galaxy device, I want to be creative. I want to create images that haven't been done before. I don't want to shoot, the stuff which people shoot. I want to go into the forest, work hard, get different compositions, break those rules, and create a genre. And this is very important, finding a niche. Don't go out there and try to shoot everything. Go out there with, an aim, and try to tell a story with that aim. Do justice to your photography, but also the subject. It's so important to do justice to the subject by either connecting your work to research, connecting it to documentation, and finding ways in which you can use your camera as a tool for conservation. So for example, with the Note 20 Ultra and the S20 Ultra, that zoom feature was incredible. I had some of the forest guards with me, and we could spot elephants raiding fields, with that zoom feature. And that's incredible. That's creating awareness. That's showing them, you know, where the animal is. And, you know, that's just an idea of how you innovate and find a focus. So be focused, find your niche, experiment, create, and do it for yourself, no one else. All right. The next question is, what is your favorite camera feature on the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra? I think I already answered that in my last question, which was the zoom feature, using it as a spotting scope. But also, you know, on 8K, now taking videos and taking 33 megapixels pictures simultaneously is something I love. I think that's so helpful. Rather than me clicking a picture, I can now get video and picture at the same time, and not just any picture, but a 33 megapixel picture, which can give me some significant resolution. Okay, next question. I want to know how to shoot long exposure, especially in landscape photography. Yeah, guys. So, you know, long exposure photography, it depends on what you're trying to shoot with landscape photography, especially, you know, you have in Samsung, the Galaxy devices, you have the bright night feature, which is beautiful. And what it does is you can set your exposure, you know, sometimes from 3 to 5 seconds. And that gives you, you know, you have to make sure you're very still and the subject is very still. And that gets you these beautiful shots. And sometimes on starry nights with longer exposures, you can create these beautiful scapes. But make sure, you know, one of my tips is to always try and place it on a tripod. Next question, want to know about your edit, by Japesh Singh. By that, do you mean my editing techniques? So to answer that, I have different styles of photography based on what devices and cameras I'm using. So right now with the Galaxy devices, I do not like to edit my pictures too much because that would not be true to the picture I'm taking. And I don't want y'all to think that, you know, these pictures which I'm, you know, if they were edited, I don't want you to think that those images are possible with, you know, these devices. So the pictures I show you are very, you know, straight up pictures where maybe a little bit of highlights and shadows are tweaked. And of course the vibrance, and something I'm very particular with, of course, is the color profiles. But the Note 20 has done fabulous on the color grading. So, you know, I don't really have to change the hues much. So to answer your question, I don't edit much with the Galaxy devices. However, with my other styles of photography, if I'm, you know, taking pictures to put up on walls, then I do edit it. Before we get to the next question, let me just have a sip of water. How can we use the S Pen to click better images? Great question. You know, I earlier did a video for the Note, and I did for the Note 10, and I did cover some interesting ways of how to use the S Pen and get very sort of creative with it. So what the S Pen does is it allows you to control your camera remotely. Now that's amazing. That's like a remote control camera. So this gives you amazing sort of features. All of a sudden I could put my camera down, you know, and back up and take a picture. Now where this came really handy was in Africa, in private conservation parks and conservancies over there. In India, we are not allowed to get off the vehicle. I'm not allowed to put the phone on the ground. So I do not recommend this. But in Africa and in places like private reserves where you are allowed to do this, and like I said, please check with the authorities before. You know, you can put your cameras on the ground and back up and take these pictures remotely. And it gives you, some of you may have seen those images of elephants which I've shot from this low angle. It gives you this prehistoric feel of this animal against the sky. And what the S Pen does is it allows you to get this unique angle. So use the S Pen, yes, to control it remotely, but then, you know, also go a step further. And because you can control it remotely, try to use it with different angles and on subjects like butterflies, like I did, on tripods to get close to them. Okay, what are your recommendations? What are your recommendations for day-to-day photography? Is that right? Is that the right question? Because it's written, what are your recommendations for day-to photography? I don't quite get that question. It says, I think it's for day-to-day photography. If that is your question, then, I always suggest experimenting. Wildlife photography today is saturated. Nature photography is very saturated. To go out and take a unique image is not easy, so for your day-to-day photography, try to avoid shooting subjects that have been shot continuously and been portrayed. Try to avoid using compositions and get creative. I always say, learn the fundamentals and the basics, experiment every day, learn the laws, and then go out and break the rules, break those laws, like the rule of thirds and others. Do what you can do best to give yourself a unique image. Initially, people might not like it. Like when I got into artistic photography, people were like, how can he edit his pictures? It was a sin back then. But today, a lot of our images and a lot of my pictures are, in galleries across the world being sold. So that is because I stayed true to my genre, to what I like doing, and I wanted to be unique. And that was learned through a day-to-day process of experimentation. Hope that answered your question. All right. Whose work has influenced you the most? Great question. A lot of people ask me who my inspiration is, and to be very honest, I have no inspiration in terms of photographers. I look up to a lot of photographers out there, and I think India especially has some fabulous photographers, some of the best in the world, and some seniors who are great teachers, as well as some juniors and the youth who are so good and doing great work with their photography, not just taking pictures, but also relating it to conservation. And that is what the youth is doing so well today. And that is a tip which I want to give you guys as well, especially for the youth who have tuned in today. Use your camera as a tool for greater purposes. This phone, which you have, is one of the most powerful tools you can use. You can keep it in your pocket, take it anywhere. And now with the features it offers you, you can take magnificent videos and pictures to relish life, and spark change. And that's what it's about. It's not just about taking beautiful pictures. So who has influenced me the most? Nature. Nature has influenced me the most. The Black Panther has been a big influence. But more than anything, it's just the beauty of the jungle. And the fact that, I go out there and feel so small. I feel so grounded. And that's what I love the most. Okay. Do you see visible difference in 4K and in 8K? Great question. There are a lot of screens out there which don't show you 8K, obviously, because they're not in 8K resolution. Of course, if you have screens with higher resolutions than 4Ks, like your 5K and your 6K, of course, you'll see the change in resolution. But what 8K does, especially for cinematographers and people who edit, is it allows you to crop into your videos and without losing, much resolution. And also it can create these beautiful pans and zoom effects and parallax effects all within the 8K video, which can then down-res it to 4K, and you still have a beautiful video. So that's how I use it. It's very handy. And then, of course, like I said, with the 33 megapixel. So guys, I hope, I've covered as many questions as I can. I just wanted to make sure, this session was as interactive as possible and leave time for these questions. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you everybody who follows my work. I'm so busy in the jungle. I don't get enough time to have these interactions with you. For everyone who's come here and for everyone who follows me, stay tuned for some new work which I'm going to be doing, new projects with Samsung on some of the stuff I've touched up upon. But yeah, it's going to be an incredible next few months. So stay tuned, and I look forward to bringing you more powerful visual imagery. For now, it's goodbye from me, and this leopard, take care.